Praise be Jesus Christ. My name is Father Pierre Giorgio of Christ the King. I'm the managing editor here at ICS Publications, and today I'm joined by Father Mark O'Keefe, a Benedictine monk of St. Meinrad Archabbey and professor of moral theology at St. Meinrad School of Theology and Seminary, the chaplain of our nuns here in Terre Haute, Indiana, where he directs them and hears their confessions and says Mass for them. Also, as most of you may know him better as, the author of several books at ICS Publications. So, Father Mark, thank you for joining me just to talk briefly about your new book that's going to be coming out, available for pre-order now, The Intimate Sharing of Friends, St. Teresa of Ávila on Prayer. What was your motivation for writing this book?
Well, if I may say first, and I really want to say this, I am so honored to be published with ICS, honestly. You do such a marvelous work in carrying on the Carmelite tradition, and to allow a humble Benedictine to be part of that, moral theologian, is really a great honor for me. This most recent book, Intimate Sharing, picks up on the research and study, the personal journey with Teresa and John that began several years ago. I began as a moral theologian, and so my first two books, Love Awakened by Love on John of the Cross and The Way of Transformation for St. Teresa, are about the more ascetical parts of their writing, where they're focusing on that part of the journey. And at that point, I never thought that I would kind of presume to kind of look into their deeper spirituality. And so the next project was in context, where I wanted to delve deeper into kind of who they were, and so I envisioned that project. But you become enthralled by St. Teresa, you become enthralled by John of the Cross. And I really feel like that happened to me. And, as much as they are treasured members of the Carmelite family, they're doctors of the church. And their teaching is for the whole church. And, as I began to delve into St. Teresa and see how much her teaching has impacted the spiritual tradition of the Catholic Church since her time, and virtually every serious discussion of prayer depends to some way on her, is in dialogue with her. And so, I thought, I found her writing so rich and so helpful to my own prayer. How can this be shared more broadly? And so, I began the project and discovered so much in when you research and write something, you learn lots of stuff, and you take it in and integrate it hopefully into your own life. But I just believe I discovered some of the richness of her teaching on prayer and why she's such a classic figure. And I wanted to share that, and that's what the book tries to do.
Yeah. One of the themes of the book, the overarching theme is really the idea that in my opinion, is why Teresa's a doctor of the church, the idea of prayer as a relationship, as friendship, and kind of the whole trajectory of that and her thinking, bringing together, her four major treatises and trying to do a little bit of systematizing and bringing together from all the sources, kind of, okay, well, she says this early on, she says this maybe in a more developed place in her spiritual thinking. And so that's kind of one aspect of this book, is kind of looking at Teresa from 30,000 feet and trying to present her to the church as the doctor of prayer. Another aspect, an important aspect of the book, is the excursus of engaging with contemporary forms of prayer, something that's very kind of hot button in certain circles. And what was your motivation for maybe exploring that and trying to explore maybe what contemporary spiritualities, how they go with and at times against maybe some of the insights of St. Teresa?
Well, I think Teresa has a unique place in helping us to recognize and answer the call into contemplative prayer, and the transition from acquired prayer, the prayer that we do with God's help, into gifted prayer. And I think that contemporary contemplative practice, things like centering prayer and Christian meditation, John Main, they're trying as well to provide a bridge into deeper prayer, into contemplative prayer. And sometimes they draw on St. Teresa and John of the Cross. And in my reading of John of the Cross and Teresa, I thought they draw on them not always in an entirely accurate sort of way, or they don't get the whole picture. And so I think I wanted to engage, I wanted to amplify St. Teresa's teaching on acquired to passive recollection by bringing in these contemporary authors and their parallel ways of thinking about things, but also to kind of make a contribution to a larger contemplative practice conversation, and to kind of show what's distinctive about St. Teresa that I think is important for any kind of Christian contemplative practice, any effort to move from acquired prayer into passive prayer.
Yeah, and so that discussion that you bring those authors with St. Teresa make up one of the 9 chapters of the book, and it's right smack dab in the middle, kind of when you begin talking about that transition. I think it was one of the most well balanced and treatments of kind of those contemporary spirituality practices that I've ever read, and being fair and objective, but also trying to show, well, there are some similarities of what they're trying to accomplish, but ultimately, Teresa's looking at something that's much bigger, and much more engulfing of the whole human person in the journey of conversion. So it was a really interesting chapter for me when I was editing to engage with, and I think a lot of people will really enjoy your presentation of that, and will gain a lot of fruit from it. Who is this book for, would you say? What are some maybe audiences that you could envision picking this up and gaining a lot from it?
Well, I think it's for anybody who's interested in prayer, because there's no one in the Catholic tradition, the Christian tradition, who is a clearer teacher of prayer and more authoritative teacher on prayer than St. Teresa. She is the master, the doctor of prayer. And so, I think anybody who wants to understand their prayer, who wants to grow in prayer, right from the beginning, can be helped by her teaching, and I hope then by this book. But also for those who God is beginning to gift with deeper prayer, with infused prayer. Teresa is very concerned for helping those people to move forward, to make the transition and enter more deeply into what God is trying to offer. And so I think anybody who's interested in the life of prayer, but in a way, for St. Teresa, the life of prayer and the Christian life, they're equivalent. They're the same thing. But you can't have a Christian life in her mind without prayer. And prayer is always focused on Christ. And so her focus is on, how do we grow in the Christian life? How do we grow in a relationship with Christ? What does that look like? And so, I think she is a teacher of Christian living, of the Christian life. And so I think in that sense, I do want to cast the net broadly. I think people who study St. Teresa, who read Teresa regularly, certainly I think they would find it very useful. But I think even those who haven't discovered before St. Teresa's wisdom and her charm, I think this book would be a good introduction.
I agree too. I'm someone who reads The Way of Perfection every year. I read it probably 6 or 7 times during my novitiate. It's not to boast or anything like that, but it's just to say I've read Teresa a lot, The Way of Perfection most of all, but I received a lot from this book, even as someone who has read a lot of Teresa and had read a lot of books about Teresa and read your other books as well, and gained a lot from those. And I agree that one of the things that really stood out to me and what I gained from it is just, maybe because I have read The Way of Perfection more than the other ones, she brings this up in the book of her life. She brings this up in the Interior Castle, and to see kind of more of those things that maybe I had forgotten about because I don't engage with those texts as often. And to really see her as that doctor of the church, that systematization of prayer that the church upholds for us as a teacher, as a doctor. That was one thing that I really gained from the book. One other type of person who I think would really gain from this book is parish priests. You and I aren't parish priests. I don't envy the things that they have to do. but I think it's a really good introduction to maybe the territory, the topography of the spiritual life that is accessible, that is relatively, it's not a doorstopper of a book. It's a little under 300 pages, that can really assist diocesan parish priests with guiding their flock, particularly people who are engaged in spiritual journey and want spiritual advice, looking for spiritual direction. I think it can be a really helpful tool for them as well.
I think that's exactly right. And I'm glad you mentioned spiritual direction, because I think she and John of the Cross are spiritual directors. They are. And what they write is spiritual direction. I teach an elective on Saint Teresa in the seminary. And I know the seminarians who take the class. They have no desire to be Carmelites or Benedictines, but they find that the teaching of Saint Teresa invigorates their own prayer, and it helps them to think about being teachers of prayer in their future ministry as parish priests.
Yeah, and so all of us who are called together to build up the body of Christ and are called to teach one another and to receive from one another as well, can be a helpful guide to assisting those whom we love and with whom we're on this journey towards eternity with God. So, Father Mark, thank you for joining me. Father Mark joined us on an episode of Carmelcast, so we'll include a link to that video in the description, and hope that you check that out as well. Thank you, and God bless you.